morning, Wildcats, and welcome to the inaugural episode of the Signpost SportsCast. I'm your host, Collyn Cowles, and I'm co-hosted by
Brayson Brown.
And today is the start of a new journey for us. We've wanted to create this podcast for quite some time and to create a visual and audio audience for what we produce at the Signpost.
Yeah, so the Signpost has been a student-run newspaper since 1937. It covers culture, news, and obviously sports. And me and you are on the sports desk. We're the editors, and we are just really excited to move with the times and, start this journey of a podcast and bring awareness to all the amazing athletes that we have on campus and all the sports and athletics club teams that we produce here at Weber State.
Yeah, no, for sure. And we've been covering sports for quite some time. We produce stories every Tuesday and every Thursday. Tuesdays being physical copies that are produced all around campus, and then on Thursdays, all of our articles are published online at the WSUsignpost.com. If you ever want to look at any articles that we write, we cover sports every Tuesday and every Thursday that happen throughout every week of the school.
Yep. So, tune in.
Yeah. And then for this podcast, we want to break this up into a 3-segment section. We have the first segment talking about some recent stories that we had covered by the Signpost. Like you said, we've been the editors for quite some time. We have 3 writers, Gavin Nelson, Tristan Ramage, and Corey Mater. They've been phenomenal additions to our desk, and we just want to get more publicity to what we do.
Yeah. And then moving into segment 2, we're also going to cover other events that happen in fall sports. Some of the ones that we don't cover in our stories that we don't have the writers for exactly to produce every single story of every single sport that happened. And so that's what our segment 2s are going to go over.
Yeah, and then finishing it off, we're just going to talk about some upcoming events for Wildcat students to either watch if they're away games or some home games that some Wildcat students can plan their school schedule around and attend with some friends or family.
Yeah.
And so jumping into the first segment, we have recent stories covered by the Signpost. So last week we had Gavin cover the historic win over Montana for football. Outstanding performance from Weber State. They traveled to Billings, Montana. They defeated the University of Montana in an overtime game win that was breaking Montana's 15 home game winning streak. And let's just talk about it for a little bit. Richie Munoz, standout performer of the offense. Garrett Beck, standout performer of the defense. And it was just a good game for Weber State football. We had a tough loss to McNeese State, but we bounced back and produced a historic win over the University of Montana.
Yeah, it was a 55-48 thriller in overtime that Weber State took the win in. And if you were watching that game, it was 2 heavyweights, going at it, throwing haymakers left and right. And it was an impressive win for Weber State.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like I said previously, Richie was a standout offensive performer. He finished the game with a total of 364 passing yards with a total of 6 passing touchdowns. 2 of his favorite wide receivers that game were Jalen Record and Jacob Sharp. Jacob Sharp finished with 5 receptions on a total of 152 yards with 2 catching touchdowns, with his longest catch being 71 yards. And Jalen Record had 3 receptions for 105 yards on also 2 catching touchdowns, with his long coming on a 51-yard. So Richie was letting that thing fly.
Yeah, absolutely. These were some Randy Moss vibes from the wide receivers, and we had a Tom Brady vibe from Richie Munoz. It was a great game. And Garrett Beck, Defensive Player of the Week also. He had impressive stat line as well. He had 8 tackles. He also had 1 forced fumble, 1 sack, and also 1 tackle for the loss. And he had the game-sealing forced fumble right in overtime to seal the dub for Weber State.
That is correct. Garrett Beck had a stellar performance against the University of Montana. And then transitioning to that, Gavin wrote the story the week after, which was last Saturday's heartbreaking defeat to the University of Northern Colorado, which Garrett Beck did not play in. We had 2 weeks ago, Keanu Bailey performed outstanding and had a Defensive Player of the Week. Week after, Garrett Beck, Defensive Player of the Week. And now transitioning to the University of Northern Colorado, we had a 21-17 loss on our homecoming game. UNC was on a 17-game losing streak before beating us last Saturday. And from Montana to Northern Colorado, it was not the performance we wanted to see.
Definitely not. It was a teeter-totter effect big time coming from Weber State football. How do you go from beating the number 8 team in the FCS to losing to the last place team in the Big Sky, who had not even won a game this year and last year?
University of Northern Colorado was on a 17-game losing streak dating all the way back to the 2022 season, which they had lost 6 before their second to last game. They won their second to last game at the end of the 2022 season, but they had lost the last game, which pushed into the 2023 season where they lost all 16 games. I don't know why we didn't produce against Northern Colorado. We didn't play the type of football that head coach Mickey Mantle I was hoping to solidify against University of Montana, but Mickey's offense did not perform against Northern Colorado.
Definitely not. This game was a defensive game. The offenses, kind of just kicked back and let the defenses do all the work mostly. Uh, the thing that really changed the game, though, was the turnover battle. And in our way, it did not go well. Richie Munoz, after having his 6 touchdown game, only contributed 1 touchdown this game, with also an interception and 3 fumbles, which 2 of those fumbles happened at the 1 yard line.
Yeah, and that's not what we like to hear for Weber State football. We've been known for being a defensive battling team. With the likes of Richie coming in last year, he's had all year to perform and to make a name for himself. And he did make a name for himself against the University of Montana. 6 touchdowns, 364 passing yards. Outstanding performance. He got Big Sky Player of the Week. He got National Player of the Week. He was top 10 on Kurt Herbstrein's top 10 performers of the week in all of college football. So Richie got his name up there against the win against Montana, but then it drops a little bit against this loss against Northern Colorado.
Oh, big time. And you can kind of tell how frustrated the team was after driving the entire length of the field and fumbling right into the end zone to just get a touchback for Northern Colorado. I mean, it was detrimental to the morale. And you could see on the sidelines, players were frustrated because they weren't getting the ball, it wasn't going their way. And, obviously this result happened.
Yeah. And the drive that kind of solidified it for Northern Colorado, they were pinned all the way back on their 2-yard line. They had a 98-yard drive, but before that, they were on a 3rd and 12. Weber State defense stopped that third down lockdown, and there was a flag on the play. Gave UNC first down, and then UNC used what they liked and marched down the field 98 yards to just rush the ball in for that final solidifying touchdown. Weber State had the chance to come back. They were down 21-17. Richie had a chance on his own 30 to drive the ball down for the Wildcats, but he threw a pick on his third throw. It was not what we wanted to see for our homecoming night.
Definitely not, especially when you're at home. Home is supposed to be where you win your games for the majority. And coming on back-to-back losses at home, it's not what it should be. And, fans are frustrated. You could hear in the stands, people were booing the team. And it's just kind of sad, how it's been working out recently.
Well, something exciting at the Weber State football game. We had the drone show at the end of the game. It was really cool to see that the W on the mountain is coming back for the first time in how many decades? Long time. And so it's cool to see that the Weber State heritage is starting to come back into the Ogden community.
Yeah, it definitely is. The drone show was really awesome. I think that was probably the highlight of the game for all the fans. And Northern Colorado, even the players were out there enjoying the drone show. They were super pumped after getting their first win in almost 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And, you could just tell by their energy and everything that they came ready to play. And, they were as a group and they won this game.
Well, transitioning from that, we did have some dubs over the weekend. Hockey had a dominating performance against Lake Region College. Talk about that. You went to the game. You saw that 12-1 beatdown.
Yeah, so over the previous week, they had a 3-game weekend against the Montana teams, University of Providence, Montana State University, and then the University of Montana. And they went 1-2. Their only win was against Providence, which was actually their first win against Providence in program history, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other 2 games, they were heartbreaking losses in overtime. But, the team has kind of been meshing together. They've been, not getting the results they wanted, but they've been playing really well. And so they came into this game looking to finally get back in the win column. And Lake Region came ready to play. They scored first. But Weber State, they said, no, not in our house, and immediately answered in 60 seconds. And then After that, they scored twice more and held a 3-1 lead after the first period. And then going into the second period, they then went on to score 4 goals, and then in the third period, they scored 5 goals. And so that brought the total to 12-1, which is an insane amount of scoring in hockey. And they outshot Lake Region 75-20, which kinda puts things into perspective, is that we were producing 3 times as many shots as this team, almost 4. And Eric Buchholz, which, this was his first start for the season, at goalie, and he had 19 saves on 20 shots, with Wes Soul and Aiden Thadee each scoring twice to lead the way for Weber State.
Yeah, no, it was definitely a win that we needed for our hockey program. We've had some heartbreaking defeats this year to the hands of the University of Utah, who haven't beat us in almost 2 years, and to the University of Utah State University. They're one of the fighting programs in the state of Utah that have been competing with us these last few years, and they got a huge dub on us to start the season out for our program. So it's good to see that our team had a bounce back and we're able to push that 1-2 weekend and totally dominate Lake Region College.
Yeah, absolutely, especially when Lake Region State College gave Utah State a run for their money. I think Utah State won either 2-1 or 3-2, so it was only a 1-goal win for them. So for us having a convincing win like that against a team that, gave Utah State all they had, I think that speaks volumes for the team, especially when Utah State, came in game 1 into our house and just, gave us a spanking.
Yeah, we'll just give a shout out to Gavin for covering those 2 football games. He's surely invested in football, so we greatly appreciate Gavin for attending these games and putting his heart into covering these games. Again, if you want to cover or if you want to check out some articles that we write every Tuesday and Thursday, WSUsignpost.com. And again, thanks to you for going to that hockey game.
Yeah, of course. I encourage anybody to go to the hockey games. They are a lot of fun.
Yeah, they're definitely one of my favorites and so many other students' favorites on this campus.
Absolutely.
And then now transitioning into our second segment, we got some other events that happened in fall sports that we just didn't have time to cover, but they're notable for this podcast. So kind of starting it off, we had our women's and men's cross country team traveling to the University of Oregon and Utah State University. We sent 5 women's runners to compete in individual competition at the University of Oregon, which was the Bill Dellinger Invitational. And then the other women's runners competed at Utah State, with our entire men's team traveling to Logan as well and competing with the women's team in Utah State. Starting it off with the women's at the Bill Dellinger Invitational in the University of Oregon, our team finished 8th place overall in an overall standpoint of 32 teams with a total of 244 points. Some our top 5 runners of this event for the women's that traveled to Oregon. Lori Murphy, who finished the team at 29th place. Saga Hagelin was very close behind her. She finished with 32nd. Daniel Bro finished at 63rd. Frances Hudson recorded an 85th place finish. And Jessica Hill was last place for the Wildcats at 86th. Wasn't last place in the event. Totally was 40 or 50 runners ahead of last place. But with our runners, Saga and Lori Murphy definitely were our top 2 performers in Oregon. And for the University of Utah at the Steve T. Reeder Memorial Invitational, hosted by the Utah State University, we only sent 5 runners. Lydia Felix, who topped the event, she finished in 7th place in this overall competition. Audrey Kager finished 11th. Trisha Thompson Davis recorded a 32nd place finish. Lauren Brimhall finished 41st. And Brooklyn Daly finished the event at 58th. So our women's cross country team traveled to Utah State. We had a 7th place finish. And then we traveled to the University of Oregon, and we finished that event with our highest at a 29th place finish. It was very cool to see our women's cross country team right before the Big Sky tournament be able to compete and make a name for themselves, especially in Oregon. That was a huge competition. University of Oregon runs cross country. They've been running cross country since ever Nike has been there. So it's it was nice to see that our ladies stepped up and produced for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely.
And transitioning over to the men's side, we had um, Bryce Anderson finished strong at the Steve Reeder Memorial for the men's team. Um, Will Luma finished strong. Carson Day and Joe Corbage were top performers, and they all finished top 20 in that event. So our men's team produced really good stats against these other schools that competed at the Reader Invitational at Utah State.
Yeah, props to them. It sounds like they did a really good job. Okay, and then moving on to the next sport, we had women's volleyball who played Idaho State on October 11th. They lost to Idaho State in 5 sets, 3-2. Something unique about this is that the women's volleyball team has played in 5 sets for 3 straight matches, and they've only came out on top 1 time. And, when you're going to 5 sets every game, it's gonna be detrimental to the body. It's gonna, get some wear and tear, gonna get more tired. And so, hopefully they can just turn this around. The record on the year is 6-10, and, but some positives to the game is Ashley Knighting, who led all players with 20 kills, which for those who don't know what kills are, that is scoring points, when you hit the ball on the opposite side of the net and it hits the ground inbounds. And then she also contributed 16 digs against Idaho State as well. So she was both the best offensive player for Weber State and the defensive player for Weber State.
Yeah. And then kind of going off of that, we have women's soccer. Back with Idaho State, women's soccer produced a 2-1 victory over the Bengals. Idaho State was 1-0 up at halftime after a 32nd minute PK, who was scored by Talia Corey. Um, the Bengals had a 1-0 lead going into halftime. Ali Swenson had an assist in the 63rd or 62nd minute to Grace Kirby to equalize the game. And then shortly after, Sammy Sofonia scored that go-ahead goal with about 23, 24 minutes left in the game. Wildcats played a defensive game, got the dub, got what we needed. Last year, Idaho State was women's soccer team's only win on the year, and it was nice to see that this is our second win on the year. We still got Big Sky Conference play continuing in these next few weeks. Women's soccer is currently 2-9-5 on the year with a 1-2 Big Sky Conference record. Yeah, that game was huge for our program. We did not want to lose to Idaho State. We shouldn't have lost to Idaho State, and we definitely performed on stats. We outshot them 15-8. They did perform more on the goalie saves, but other than that, we led in corner kicks, and we did foul them more than they were. That was a very physical game. That's not the stat you want to see unless if you weren't producing yellow cards or red cards. But for the most part, there was only one yellow card in the game that came from Idaho State in the 46th minute. So even with our 16 fouls, we didn't produce any cards.
That's amazing, yeah. It was a great game for Weber State. They've had kind of a tough season yet again last year. They only won 1 game, but this year, hey, they've won 2, so that's a step in the right direction. But I think they've played really well throughout the season. I think their possession has been pretty remarkable. They're making good runs. The midfielders are playing the balls to the forwards pretty nicely. The only issue is just putting the ball in the back of the net. And so to finally have a game where we scored 2 goals, that is great. And especially when the goals aren't coming from Ali Swenson, who is, I would say, our top player and our top forward. And it's nice to see the other ladies on the score sheet and
Yeah,
producing.
especially Grace Kirby. Grace Kirby had a hard. She was a freshman last year, had a lot of playing time last year. She's a right winger for the team. She gets bounced around a lot on right mid, right wing, sometimes on the left. Last year she was on top of Ali. She was one of our more contributing players to our offense on our women's soccer team. So it was good to see her get into the goal column. She led the team with 6 total shots, with also leading the team with 2 of those shots being on target. So it's nice to see that our women's soccer team is performing more than Ali Swenson.
Yeah, definitely. And also an interesting stat for the game is that there was 0 offsides for both teams.
Yeah, soccer is a very competitive game, and you try and get the slightest advantage, and just the fact that there weren't any offsides call that entire game, it kind of made you feel like if it was either a possession battle or if it was just all go up, all go back.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. From the looks of that, you would guess it would just be a defensive game, but I mean, as you can see, it was 2-1. So
Yeah. But yeah, and then transitioning into our last topic of some sports that happened this last week was women's golf. So women's golf traveled to the Portland State Invitational, and they finished second out of 10 teams. The likes of many Big Sky schools competing in this tournament, such as Montana State, Eastern Washington, University of Idaho, University of Montana, Portland State, and Idaho State. In their own tournament, Portland State finished ninth on a course that they can practice on any day of the week. And so it was cool to see that our women's team traveled up there, had one objective, and they got it done.
yeah, absolutely. Taking second place and only missing first place by 7 strokes is very impressive, especially when you're traveling all the way over to Oregon and, laying down the law and claiming your territory.
Yeah, no, for sure. They were 7 strokes behind first, 2 strokes ahead of third, and 5 strokes ahead of fourth. So it was really a it was a good performance by our women's golf program. For anyone who doesn't know, golf is a very hard sport. It's not about power, it's about accuracy. So it was good that our ladies showed their accuracy in Portland.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, showing their hard work that they've been doing all year long and, the results are coming.
In the classroom, out of the classroom, our women's golf team is one Big Sky academic all team last year. So they're definitely the girls you want to look up to.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then transitioning into our final segment, the third and final segment of our podcast, it's some upcoming events for Wildcat students to attend. So if you're a Wildcat student, you go to school here, you pay tuition, you come up here like everyone else does, and if you don't have your wild card, get your wild card at the Shepherd Union. You can attend some home games for free: football, basketball, softball, hockey, any event that is covered at Weber State University. You could bring up to 2 people for free, including yourself. So if you don't have a wild card, get your wild card, go to some events for free, bring some family, bring some friends, have a good time. But for some upcoming events for Weber, we got football coming up. We got an away game against Sacramento State this weekend. We this is a huge game for our men's football team. Back to back home games that we lost. Not what we wanted to see, but with Sac State, this is a game that we need.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they need to get back in the win column really quick before the season just starts to slip through their fingers. But moving on, we have hockey, who has a 3-game weekend in Missouri. They're going to be playing at the Lindenwood Invitational. And would you like to cover more on the facility that they're going to be playing in?
Yeah, no. So they last year our men's hockey team went to nationals. We skipped out on regionals. We were one of the best ACHA hockey teams in the ACHA, not state of Utah, the whole Western Conference. We outranked some top-notch teams, and last year we went to nationals, and we competed where the Linwood Invitational is being held. So these are some familiar rinks that our guys are some returning players, such as Corey Mater, Yancey, our goalie, some Goodwin, some returning players to our team that are very familiar with. So it's going to be interesting to see how the new identity of our team goes to Missouri and can kind of find what the identity of the team last year left off on.
Yeah, I think it'll be a good experience for them, to get a feel in those, places and hopefully, work hard enough to get back there again this season.
Yeah, they'll have their first game against Linwood University, which is a late game. They have that at 10 p.m. They turn around on Saturday and they play Trine University. That's a midday game. And then on Sunday, they also have another late game against the University of Iowa. So they're going to get home late Sunday night, turn around, have some home games the week after. But definitely is going to be good for our hockey program to see where they left off last year.
Yeah, exactly. Moving on to the next sport, we have men's and women's tennis, who have the ITA Invitational in Las Vegas, taking place from October 17th through the 22nd. So let's wish them luck.
Yeah, men's and women's tennis. Recently had the University of Utah Invitational. There weren't many stats on that online. It seems like men's and women's tennis hasn't been getting much media coverage, even from athletic programs, which is boggling to me because if it's an athletic program, you treat it as football, basketball, but you treat it as an athletic program. And so it just kind of sucks that our men's and women's teams don't have the recognition from Weber State. You have to find information from the other schools, but then even then, these other schools also don't really care much about their men's and tennis programs.
It does. It seems like they're just scratching the surface initially, for the tennis, which is crazy because tennis is a very popular sport worldwide. You got Wimbledon, you got the US Open, you got the Australian Opens. Yeah, there's a lot of publicity, and popularity that comes from tennis, and it just seems like it's kind of just a secondary sport, which is not good.
And our men's and women's tennis teams have a lot of foreign exchange students. These students travel from their home countries. If it's Argentina, if it's Spain, if it's wherever they come from, they travel. They're homesick, and they can't even find stats on themselves on our athletics page. Like, if I was a Weber State athletic athlete, I would want to show my family what I do. I'd want to physically have these stats online to show what I've done.
Absolutely, especially like you said, for these foreign players, how are their parents going to know, what happened?
Yeah. If there's no live scoring, if there's no vis- fi- physical visual recording of these games, if you go and look at our men's and women's tennis on our website, there's not much to it. So definitely in the future, we want to get more coverage on men's and women's tennis so they can get that recognition that they definitely deserve.
Absolutely. Okay, moving on, we have men's and women's cross country NCAA pre-nationals, correct? On the October 18th.
Yeah. So Um, like noted before, after the Utah State and the University of Oregon Invitationals, they both men's and women's cross country are traveling for the Big Sky tournament. They're doing some pre-national workouts. Hopefully, skip out on Big Sky if they all finish first place. But that's very far fetched to say. It's a team sport, so they all have to rely on one another. So um, best of luck in pre-nationals, but more best of luck in the Big Sky tournament coming up on November 1st.
Yeah, most definitely. Moving on, we have women's soccer versus Idaho and Eastern Washington, and they're just coming off that dub against Idaho State. So we're wishing them luck in getting these conference wins, which are going to be huge.
Yeah, there's four women's games less, 4 women's soccer games left on the year. We got University of Idaho on October 18th. That's going to be an away game for our women's program. And then shortly after, 2 days later, we're going to travel right up to Eastern Washington on October 20th. We got 2 away games within 2 days. They're going to come back home. They have 2 home games to finish off the year. So these are 2 crucial games to get our not just overall record, but Big Sky record. That's what matters in our women's soccer program.
I think just getting the program back on track is should be the goal right now. The season hasn't turned out very well, but I think it's not always how you start, but it's how you finish. And so if they can finish this strongly, it can move into next season. And, who knows what could happen.
And then coming up, we got men's basketball coming up. Men's basketball is going to be traveling to Utah State University, which is in Logan, Utah, on October 18th. This game is set for 7 p.m. This is a exhibition match. It's a cancer awareness match between these two schools. Every year, if it's either BYU, University of Utah, or Utah State, Weber State loves to get a good feel of what their basketball team looks like and just get a hard game right off the start of the season. Yes, this is preseason. It doesn't count towards their overall record, but it is going to count to how the team looks going into the start of the year.
Yeah, what are your expectations going into this game?
Yeah, no, there's a lot of expectations. We lost the likes of Dylan Jones to the NBA. He's on the Oklahoma City Thunder now. He followed the likes of Damian Lillard and made his name renowned at Weber State University. So it's going to be interesting to see how our team transitions from one ball dominant player to 3 to possibly 4 ball dominant players. We got a huge transfer from Idaho State and Miguel Tomley. Miguel Tomley led the Big Sky in 3-point percentage. He led the Big Sky in 3 points attempted and in 3 points made. So that's the type of player we haven't seen in a long time at Weber State. Last year, we did have the likes of Stephen Verplanken shooting it on the outside arc, but nothing like Miguel Tomley. Miguel is a very isolated player. So it's going to be interesting to see how the team transitions from pick and roll to an ISO. If we can get the ball off, if we can feed Alex 2 into the paint, and if we can feed our pick and roll a little bit on top of the ISO, I think Eric Duft has a very exciting team this year.
That's super exciting to see. And Utah State, was coming off of winning the Mountain West Conference, but they lost their head coach to the University of Washington and their best player in Gray Osibor, who was one of the top power forwards in the nation. And they made a run in March Madness, but fell short. But I think it'll be a good test for Weber State, especially, to see where they're at, like you said, to see how the team flows, how the offense is going to work now with a lot of ISO, as you're saying. And I think it'll be a great game.
Yeah, no, for sure, and we'll be attending that game. So next week we'll jump back on here and we'll talk about our experience with that game. It's going to be very exciting to go to. Um, Very exciting to see how Miguel plays. Very stoked about that. And then coming up, we got women's volleyball. They're going to be traveling to the University of Idaho on October 17th for a night game at 7 p.m. And then the day after, they're traveling to Eastern Washington on October 18th. The next time the women's volleyball team will be at home is the only home event for the next week, which is on October 24th versus Sac State, which is set for 6 p.m.
Yeah, that's crazy. If you kind of look at it, women's soccer and women's volleyball play the exact same two teams. I wonder if they're going to carpool or whatnot.
Yeah, no, the Big Sky does like to do that when these smaller programs are traveling. They just all one budget.
Yeah.
So
Well, we're wishing them luck. Hopefully they come out with the wins for Weber State. And yeah.
yeah, and good luck to Weber State Athletics this week, and safe travels to our teams that are going out of state borders. Um, but yeah, that's it for us. Again, we love Weber State sports. We love talking about sports. We love doing this. We wanted to bring more of a vocal and visual aspect to what we're doing, and to physically show students at the school of who we are, what we do, and how much this truly means to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're really super excited for what's to come, especially with this podcast. And, thank you for anyone tuning in and, giving us their time.
Yeah, thanks for everyone. Thank you once again, and have a good rest of your day.